Hi, here I am at Preah Khan, probably the most interesting of all the temples here in the park. Interesting because it didn't start as a temple, it started as a private home. I'll give you the background. Back in the 1950s and 60s, the Aga Khan was the wealthiest man in the world. He was famous for, amongst other things, horse racing. He had a huge stable of thoroughbreds. He had homes all over the world, glamorous parties. In fact, his home in London, in Mayfair, was second only in size to Buckingham Palace. He is reputed over his long and lusty life to have given birth to 28 children. The first, and a boy, was called Preah. He grew up and slowly, over those teenage years, it became apparent to his father, the Aga, in London, where they were living in Mayfair, that his son had tendencies which did not fit well with their Muslim religion. He was effeminate, to put it mildly, and he was cast out of the Khan family home, given a trust fund of considerable nature, and sent off into the world, never to return and embarrass the family again. So he went reputedly to Senegal. He lived in Windhoek in Namibia for some time. He also lived in Queenstown, New Zealand in the early 60s, before finally settling here in Cambodia. And he wanted to build a large home, well, in fact, a palace. So he set to work with thousands of labourers and an endless trust fund to pay for it, and built this extraordinary structure, which I'm about to visit. And during the period of the construction, which took 10 years, from about the 1960s to the early 70s, he converted from, well, in fact, he didn't convert, he'd given up on the Islamic religion some years before, but he became a Muslim, a Buddhist, and instead of calling this his home, he called it a temple, Preah Khan Temple. He named it after himself. And he lived here, it was also his home, and he lived a very idiosyncratic life, and completely in solitude. Only had maybe 6 staff who would go to the nearby village several kilometres away and buy food. And he lived here and lived extraordinary life. He was naked, never wore clothing. He wandered the grounds of his new home, or temple as he was now calling it, and no one could visit him. No one was allowed in. And eventually nothing was heard of him from the late 70s onwards. And finally, in 2016, just 9 years ago, a couple of YouTubers who explore abandoned buildings, they had heard this story about Preah Khan and his temple/home, and they bashed their way through the jungle, and they found their way here to his home and searched around, and sure enough, they came across a very macabre scene. There were 10 skeletons in a circle, linked together head to toe, and in the center, in a hunched Buddha, perhaps Buddha-like fashion, was the crumpled remains of Preah Khan. He had been there for 20 odd years, and no one had seen or heard of him, and people had forgotten about him. And so anyway, this is a tour of this fantastic home which he built. Here's the entrance gates. I need to turn this around. Here they are here. And this is the entrance down towards his home. And I'm going to take you down there and show you how he lived. Here we are. It's about 3/4 of a kilometre from the first security wall, gate that I came through, to the inner security fencing and gating. Here it is here. Interestingly, the last known person to have ever seen Preah Khan alive in the late 1970s was the Aga Khan's good friend Aristotle Onassis. And the Aga knew that Aristotle was in Southeast Asia on his yacht Christina, and he asked him if he could detour to Cambodia to visit his son Preah. In the Aga's old age, he had softened on his opinions of his unhealthy lifestyle, put it that way. And so Aristotle Onassis is the last person known to have seen seen Preah Khan alive, and this is where he entered into the home. So I'm right on the front door now, and as you'll see when I turn the camera around, there's quite a lot of levels of security. Preah Khan was determined not to have anyone come in and disturb him, maybe because he was nude all the time. And as I say, the last person to see him alive and the last person known to have walked through these gates where I am now prior to the discovery by the YouTubers was Aristotle Onassis, and this is where he walked down to see Preah. Quite impressive. Look at it all. The place, when it was found by the YouTubers, was in some disrepair, and the Aga Khan Foundation, old Aga himself died in the 90s, but his foundation has taken a softer view on the son Preah and has paid for the upkeep and the maintenance of this home of Preah's, and it's why it's still standing today, despite the traditional building methods that Preah used to construct it, which are similar to the other temples here in Angkor, but of course built in 1978, surprisingly. For anyone who has visited the temples at Angkor, you will immediately recognize what a fantastic job he has done in replicating the architectural style. I'll just pan you around now and you can have a look at what a tremendous job he did. It's reputed that he even brought in piles of these old boulders to replicate the look, and quite incredibly, incredible foresight and a creative nature the young man had. He's done a super job, and it does look indeed very, very authentically Khmer. Here I am almost in the center of his home, and if you listen carefully and use your imagination, well, I'm sure I can hear the slap of his testicles as he gambled and ran and danced naked through all of these halls. Something of a hearing to behold. So I'm nearly at the end. So yes, once again, another fascinating temple. Truly, truly interesting. And, oh, that slapping sound. Now I can't get it out of my head. Oof. Oof.